really neat speaker coming up. So sometimes one of us strategists makes the leap over to client side. And sometimes that leap is to someplace really interesting. So let's take the case of millennials. Strapped, as we're hearing in the news, and many know firsthand all too well, with outside student debt and other financial burdens, a lot of millennials are putting off that rite of passage called buying a home. They just simply struggle to pull together the down payment. Cari is a former agency planner. She's been a planner on many leading brands, including Toyota, Levi's, Coca-Cola, a lot of great household names. She's now CMO of Unison, a company that is reinventing the mortgage industry for the sharing economy. Right? Fascinating. We're going to find out how that works. And breaking news, just last week, Cari was named one of Forbes' top 50 game changer CMOs in the nation. So we're pretty fortunate to have her here today. What can we learn about how she's adjusted her strategic approach now that she's leading a category disruptor? Let's find out. Welcome, Cari Jacobs.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. As Erica said, my name is Cari Jacobs, and I am the CMO of a company called Unison, the world's first home co-investing company. There we go. Oh, got it. So I'd like to say just a little bit about who the heck I am. As Erica said, I started off my career in ad agencies. I started actually as a media planner. I then got into client service and finally found my home in strategy and planning. These are some of the agencies I worked for and some of the clients that I worked for. And as you can imagine, after 18 years working in New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco, I really had one lens. I began my career in this industry, and by the time I went on the client side 18 years later, I really saw everything through the entire business landscape through the lens of an ad agency. And so I mistakenly thought that my clients thought of me about 80% of their day. I had a lot of, as I moved over into the CMO role, I had a lot of shifts around what it actually meant to be a CMO. Now I've been in the CMO seat or in a marketing leadership seat for 6 years. I've built 4 startups, one of which went public, the other was sold to Walmart. And in that time, I've learned a few things that I want to share with you today. And I'm going to start with 5 things that I've learned. And these are purposely a little caustic, so let's take them, hold them lightly. So number 1 is that CMOs are actually not thinking about you as much as you think they are. And I say this with all the love in my heart because of course we're thinking about our agencies and our planners and all the ways that we're going to market, but there's so much more that a CMO is thinking about. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. Also, most business leaders don't know what good creative is, and they don't know, they actually don't value it the way we do, right? So CMOs spend a lot of time trying to hold that balance between helping business leaders understand why good creative matters and how good creative gets built, and holding down all the other aspects of business strategy that they need to be thinking about. Number 3, most executives, I say many here, but really most executives think that a brand is a logo and a tagline. And this ranges from a small company like Unison, which is only 200 people, all the way up to big companies like Amazon that you heard Mark talking about. Number 4, CMOs are actually responsible for way more than advertising. This was very surprising to me. It sounds very simple, and those of us who have been in business for a long time, we inherently know that. But to really know it and to really let the pebble drop about how true this really is much different. And 5, which is probably the most important thing that I'm going to tell you in the first half of this presentation, is that advertising is much more of an outcome than it is the predominant way in which CMOs should be thinking about their role today. So there's a new remit of a CMO. And as I was thinking through this problem, I really wanted to create a framework for myself to help myself sort of architect and think through. And I came up with the 6 lenses of the brand. And as you can see, Marcom, advertising and storytelling, is certainly one of those lenses, but there are 5 other lenses that are critical. And those 5 lenses, which we're going to go through in a moment, are really held together by the center point of customer experience design. And so we've been talking a lot about that today. We'll talk about it for the rest of the day. And there is an opportunity, I think, for the strategists and the planners in the room to be playing at a much bigger level than you're playing today when it comes to helping your CMOs. And this is in the area of customer experience design. The framework that I created, the 6 lenses of the brand, is sort of a very simplified way to begin to kind of move through how to think about customer experience design. So the first piece of this is really going in and looking at a company's vision, mission, values, and the nexus of that between their product and the customer experience. And this can be a small company. In the case of Unison, we started with nothing, and I'm going to share that in a moment. But even in the case of a big company, where they have a vision that's been in place for years, or a mission that's been in place for 1 to 2 years, it's so critical that you look at the intersection point between that and the product. And by product, I actually mean 2 things. So there's the commercial product, so for example, if you're marketing a car. And then there's the technical product, so the app, the web experience. And as you all know, as consumers in your everyday life, if something falls down on an app, that is actually what I call an authenticity leak in the brand. So who better to be keeping an eye on that? This is why you're seeing a lot of product innovation and design teams moving under the CMO now. Because really it is imperative that every touch point and every piece about customer experience, including the product, is locked in. Culture, we talk a lot about culture, and I'm sure many of you have talked about this with your clients, but again, I talk a lot about authenticity leaks. These are leaks in the system of building a brand. As a CMO, if I spend $100 here without making sure that I'm at least 90% locked on these first 3 lenses, then I'm being very irresponsible because I'm throwing good money after bad. If I can't say that my product is locked down, if I can't say that, for example, in lens number 5, my technology is moving quickly, if my load times are slow, all of this matters to the brand. And this should be the way in which the CMO is actually approaching the conversation at the C-suite level. And of course, there's growth, sales, and customer care. There's a lot of talk in the last breakout session here about like what is the future of the chief growth officer, what does that mean, and how does that nexus over with the CMO, and it's an important discussion to have. But these 5 lenses are really the first place that a CMO needs to start. They need to have a seat at the table when talking about technology. And as planners and strategists, think of the opportunity for you to actually be thinking about and driving some of that conversation. Now, you don't need to drive it from the standpoint of what technology is best. But you do need to be driving it from the standpoint of what is that customer's experience of your brand through the lens of technology. And then finally, we have marketing, advertising, and storytelling. So I'm going to tell you a little story. This is actually a snapshot of a map that I started back in 2002. I was working at Team One. We were asked to pitch the KitchenAid business, and we were asked to show creative integration, which back in 2002 just meant like everything should look alike, right? And it was 12 a.m. and I was all by myself and I was trying to figure out how I could show this in a PowerPoint document, and I decided that first I would roll a big piece of vellum out on the floor and I would just start sketching out all the different creative elements that we had done for Lexus. And of course, I was 35 at the time, I was single, I was living in LA, so what better way to sketch out a framework than my dating life, which is what I did. So I had the handshake, the courtship, and as I began to sketch this out, I just started thinking about like, wow, what does this actually yield us in terms of data? And how does this actually change the way we're thinking about profiling? How does it change the way we're thinking about targeting? And so this was really the first customer journey map, so I'm going to claim it today. Saatchi called it the wall at the time. And unfortunately, we did not win the KitchenAid business, but Toyota fell in love with it, and Saatchi fell in love with it, and they began using it for years, and we called it the wall, and it ended up being 30 feet long, a piece of vellum, an actual physical piece of vellum that we would roll out and wrap around the room. And the point here is that this thinking always belonged with you. It always belonged with you. Because who knows the customer better than you? And there's a huge gap. You heard the speaker before me, if you were in that session, talk about this gap where companies are trying to sort this out and people are coming to the table and trying to figure it out, and they're figuring it out from all these different perspectives. And really that perspective, there's a great opportunity for you to be driving that. So let's talk for a minute about how we applied this to Unison. So I will first say that we did some very interesting things before we dove into trying to understand who the customer was. And when I arrived there, they were using an operating model that was built by financial engineers. Now, would that work for a customer-centric business? Probably not. So I had to do something very brave, which is I had to walk into my CEO's office and I had to say, we need to redo the operating model for the company. And he got very uncomfortable and he was like, you're the CMO, why are you coming in and talking about operations? And I said, because I can't deliver against those 6 lenses. And there's no point in me spending a dime unless this company is set up to deliver across those 6 lenses. And so we did that. We built a new operating model for the company. We redefined roles and responsibilities for where we are today. And then the second thing I did, which was also semi-radical, and I had the opportunity to do this just because there was nothing in place, was that I actually started by bringing 2 agencies and the research company to the table at the same time. So I hired Elephant to do the digital experience work. I hired Cutwater, which is Chuck McBride's new agency, to do the brand work, and Harris to do the customer research. So as you can imagine, it was pretty fun having 2 executive creative directors in the room at all times trying to figure out what the color palette should be or what the tagline should be. But it yielded for us, for Unison, it yielded something really great, which is, if you're Elephant and you're thinking through what is the digital brand guidelines need to be, that's a much different question than if you're Cutwater and you're thinking about how is this going to appear on a billboard. And by having those 2 agencies in the room experiencing the customer research at the same time, we yielded a very scalable, fast to market brand opportunity where we could just move very, very quickly from 0 to what you're going to see now in about 8 months. So first thing I did after I set up that operating model is I pulled the C-suite in a room and I ran this much like you would run a brand positioning exercise. So we were really looking at reshaping the vision, the mission, and the values for the company. And we did things that you would expect as planners, right? We did brand neighborhood exercises. I had them each take 2 personas and they had to write in the first person what those personas might be thinking or feeling. Now, this seems very germane to us, but I can assure you, to a COO who's only been running a $140 billion cat fund, a really different exercise. So to begin to have at that C-level this level of customer empathy and power to the people being your customer was really different. And as you can see, it really yielded a very customer-centric vision and a mission. And so think about, even if you have the most mature client out there and you're working on a unit or a product, think about what you might be able to do by sort of reinventing whatever they want to call their vision and their mission. You can call it whatever you want, but some way for them to orient around their goal. And then with the values, we did the same thing. And in a startup, because this is my 4th, one thing that I've learned is that the brand positioning, the vision and the mission and the values needs to be a direct reflection of the founder. So it's really important that all of these pieces of the brand, when you're building a new category and a new brand, have to kind of sync together. And so we started off by having him give his shot as to what he thought the values of the company were. And then we expanded that to the C-suite. And then we did a bottom-up approach where we handed every employee in the company a field notes book. And they spent 1 month. And in meetings and in conversations with customers, they made notes about what they thought the values of the company were. And we yielded this pretty differentiated kind of set of values. And then we needed to go out, and this is where, this is the stuff that you do every day, but we needed to go out and do customer research. This was, as Erica said, this is a millennial target, and we really didn't know much about what they really thought, and so we decided to do something a little bit different, which is that we picked 4 geographies, and we booked them for the entire day. So there were 12 participants per geography. So my geography was LA. And we asked them to do 2 things for us. We asked them to tell us how much they wanted to spend on a home and what neighborhood that they want to be in. And we screened them pretty rigorously. They had to have actual buying power, so they had to have enough in their savings account to be able to buy a home, and they had to sort of be in the market and be actively shopping. And we put them all in a van at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we went out and looked at houses together. They didn't know who I was. They thought I was one of them. And the first house that we showed them, so mine was LA, and so the neighborhood was Echo Park, very hip, very cool neighborhood. $750,000 was the price they thought they wanted to get a home for. So we went to the first home, $750,000 Echo Park. We walk into the home, and there are no floors. It is subflooring. There are no appliances in the kitchen. And so you watch as people start to like that recognition of, holy cow, right? Like, I am nowhere near where I need to be to get the home I want. And so over the course of the day, we stepped them up to 4 homes. And by the end of the day, we're looking at a $1.2, $1.3 million home, and they're nodding, oh yeah, this is the house I want, and then we give them the price. And it becomes abundantly clear that they're like 5, 6, 7, 10 years, 12 years away from actually owning a home. Put them all back in the van, we bring them back to the focus group room, and then we expose them to the product. And this is one of our big findings, probably the biggest one, and this is called the millennial mindset. So most of these were millennials, but some weren't. They were people like me, I'm Gen X. And what we found was there was something, the millennials have obviously disrupted everything around us, but they've also disrupted generational thinking. And what they stand for has bled into the generations that came before them, so Gen X and baby boomers. And what we found was that, they show up as all millennials tend to show up, which is smart, savvy, sophisticated, they're hardworking, but there were a few things that made it really unique. The first was that they seem to have, and again, this was across, not just millennials, but across all ages, they seem to have this optimism. Whereas, in my day, it was just like you said, oh, well, it's just the way things are. They didn't have that. They were very set on kind of solutions to puzzles. They didn't see barriers as glass half empty. They really saw this as an opportunity to create and fight their way to a solution which was very, very different. The other big finding that we found was that we're all under financial stress. And again, it used to be when I was growing up, if you heard someone was under financial stress, what that meant was like the dad had lost his job and they were moving out of the neighborhood, right? Or they were moving to a different city. But today, that's not the case. Today, everyone feels financial stress. And though millennials would show up as really confident and they knew their way around finances, as soon as you started to dig a little bit deeper, the tears started to come. And you got down into the emotionality of what it means to not be able to afford a home. And the fact that people are putting off having kids, and they're putting off getting married, and they're putting off even having a pet. Right? And they don't know for how long, because they're 35, 36, 37, 38 years old, and they're still not able to feel like the comfort level that you would want to have their first child. So super emotional time. This is like a 4-phase, you've probably seen frameworks like this. This is Cutwater. So this was sort of where we landed, and Erica talked about the sharing economy, and we kind of crossed this millennial mindset over with the cultural current and collaborative consumption. And what we found was there was a really remarkable opportunity for us to really ground ourselves in the sharing economy. That we really were the first sharing economy company designed to help people get into homes by investing alongside them. And this was the final insight, right? Which is we can always go further together than alone. And I'll show you the first brand spot. Oops. Do you want me to click here? Okay. Let me know, it's okay if you want me to keep rolling. We can go back and look at them once you're ready. Go ahead. Okay. Hopefully we'll get to show you some of these. If not, you can find them online. But this also lent we get to name a category. Who gets to do that, right? So we got to name the category. And so what we named this was home co-investing from Unison. And Erica talked a little bit about the way it works, but essentially we pool investor funds, so big, slow growth money, like 300 million, 400 million into a fund. And we take that fund and we co-invest alongside consumers to get them to 20%. And we take a share of the future equity upon sale of the home. So that can be up to 30 years. So it's not a loan, you don't pay a monthly fee. So it's a really good opportunity for people to get into homes in a really new way of thinking about this. And we then announced home co-investing, this new category, in another TV spot, which I don't think we'll be able to see. Let me know if that changes, guys, back there. And we blew it out much like you would, hyper-local campaign. These are the ways in which you can see that it sort of took shape in San Francisco. But more exciting than this is the way it took shape inside of our company and the way it helped us to scale so quickly. So just to give you a sense of the timing on this work, because we had done so much work around those 6 lenses, so we had the technology firing, we knew we needed to have very fast load times, we knew we had to have clean, easy design of technology, and engineering had to work alongside us, right? We knew that this had to go full funnel, all the way from the top of the ground all the way to the bottom. We knew that it had to make its way into our sales scripting so that when people called in, it felt the same, but we also knew we didn't have time to go through and train the whole organization on this. So by doing the 6 lenses, they were trained by the time this launched. So from the brand insight that you saw, if we go farther together than alone, to launch, it took us 3 months to launch everything. Everything, including a brand new website. I was quite exhausted, as you can imagine. And you know, the early indications, just to give you some sense of how it did, we had double-digit growth in terms of brand awareness and brand sentiment. We also had, which is the first time I've ever seen it in an awareness funnel, we had 100% conversion from familiarity to consideration, which is unheard of if you're looking at brand funnels. It's unheard of. And so in closing, what I'd like to say to you is think bigger than you are today. Think that big and bring us that big thinking, because we're absolutely looking for it in the new remit of the CMO. So thank you very much.
Hi.
Hi.
That's an entirely, I wish I had known. I wish you had existed when it was time, right?
Yeah.
So there was something really interesting when you started with the 6 circles, and you said we should place ourselves into those places, into operations, into development of product, those sorts of things. When I entered this industry, I remember someone saying, I got out of this industry because the advertising industry, communications, used to be in the boardroom. And then we moved into the meeting room. And I would suggest at this point, a lot of agencies are feeling a lot like they're in vendor status, right? Mm-hmm. But you've been in that world and then come over. So do you have some helpful hints about how to get into the boardroom, how to get into the C-suite, how to have those conversations? What is it that we can do that can help create an entree into those places?
That's a very great question. And I think it is about thinking about customer experience design and thinking about this holistic approach of the 6 lenses, rather than just thinking about marketing and advertising. Because they're typically, we see a lot of companies talking about customer centricity and power to the people, but in truth, it's kind of a lot of talk unless you can make it real in the boardroom. But if you can walk in, so for example, I'm giving a talk next week in Las Vegas where I'm talking about using customer experience design as the architecture and framework to your entire business strategy. So imagine, if you will, like you're laying out your customer experience design, but instead of it becoming about marketing and how you market along the way, you're looking at how can a particular moment in truth be solved by an app? Whether that app has anything to do with money or making money or revenue for the company or not, right? How can something be solved by a customer service issue? And you start to roadmap out 2 to 3 years of what a business could look like. That kind of conversation gets you into the boardroom.
That is music you can use. Certainly I can, so thank you. When you say that value should come from the founder, what makes you say this, and how does that work?
Yeah, so again, I sort of talked about authentic branding, which is a big part of what I would hang my hat on doing. And part of that authenticity piece is that whatever you're going to say out in the marketplace, you absolutely have to reflect internally. And if every single employee in your organization is not a walking 30-second TV spot, you've failed. And part of why that needs to come to the founder is so responsible for carrying out those values and driving them down into the organization. If you're sort of absent that leader or that founder, that CEO, I think you're absent a big chunk of why a company exists in the first place. And they sort of birth this, and so it's so important in that birthing process for what they perceive their company is to be in lockstep with how you're presenting it to the outside world. That's a little bit of the magic, right? That you're getting that mirroring effect, and that's the fun of, for a planner and a strategist to be able to really think through how to create that.
Right, and to bring that baby into the world.
To bring that baby into the world in a different way than the founder, right? Because the founder's perceiving bringing it through one way, and you're perceiving bringing it through a different.
Well, it's just like people can serve as translational communications between scientists and the world. Mm-hmm. It sounds like it's a version of translational communications. So we should all go to Harvard and get our degrees in translational communications.
Mine was financial engineering.
Well, look there. You did okay. I think you did okay. What data, when you walked into that C-suite and you said, all right, we have to do this entirely differently than you're looking at it, what case did you make of? Was it data-based, or how did you do that?
Well, so in truth, today when you're interviewing for a big senior role, you have to do a mini project, which means you have to walk in and you have to present sort of your strategy, and you're given 4 days to do it. And so I was, my data was pretty intuitive, I have to admit. Now I'd done 15 years in acquisition and performance marketing, so I had lots of data in terms of how to think about the bottom of the funnel. But I thought, wow, it's not really enough anymore. Everyone's talking about full funnel marketing. And I kept thinking, why is it then not working? Why are we not in boardroom conversations? And why is there this sort of, CMOs are either being kind of almost relegated to a corner, or they're taking center stage. And I was sort of thinking about what makes a center stage CMO, right? And for me, it was we have to wear two hats. We have to wear the hat that says I'm executing marketing, but we also need to wear the hat that says I am running a company. And if I were to run a company, how would I run the company? And that's where I came up with the 6 lenses for that mini project.
Tremendous. All right. Well, that is a lot that we can take home with us. So thank you very much.
You.
Really appreciate it.